Hello, time for a Man in Gray book review. Today's book is No One Writes to the Colonel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, translated from Spanish by J.S. Bernstein, originally published in 1961. This English translation was published by Penguin Books in 1996. It's 69 pages. This book is an early work by the Nobel Prize-winning Colombian novelist, and it uses a straightforward, realistic style of writing. You don't have the supernatural or magical elements, fantasy elements that you see in Garcia Marquez's later works like 100 Years of Solitude. Garcia Marquez was one of the founders of the magic realism movement, which began to dominate South American literature in the late 60s and through the 1970s. This early novel it concerns basically it's sort of a take on Samuel Beckett's play Waiting for Godot. And if you're not familiar with that play, it's about two men who wait around for someone named Godot to show up and make their lives complete. But he never does show up. Someone always comes and promises that he'll be there, but he never shows up. In this story, an elderly man, simply known as the Colonel, has been waiting around for 15 years for a pension that he was promised by the military. The Colonel was a veteran of an incredibly bloody civil war fought in Colombia called the Thousand Days War, which took place at the turn of the last century, in which liberal and conservative factions fought in an incredibly violent war. And even though the war only lasted about 1,000 days, it killed about 3% of the adult population in Colombia. So it was the bloodiest civil war in Colombia's war-racked history. So the Colonel was a survivor of that war, and he was promised a pension. And the story takes place in the early 1950s during a time of another civil war known as La Violencia, or the violence. This was another period where conservatives and liberals were fighting each other. The conservative government controlled the cities, but the liberals controlled the countryside and small towns, and the conservatives launched raids. They put the whole country under martial law and censored the press and arrested people on any pretext whatsoever. And so during this very difficult period, the Colonel lives with his elderly wife in this small town out in the middle of nowhere, and they have been selling off their stuff in their house to try to pay bills and feed themselves, while he waits desperately for this pension check to save him. And at the beginning of the story, they're down to where they basically sold everything they have that's worth anything. And so they're starving. And the only thing they have left of any value is a fighting rooster that belonged to the Colonel's son. The Colonel's son was killed a few years earlier in an act of political violence. And so the rooster is the only thing they have that belonged to his son that they still have. And so they keep it partly for that reason. And the Colonel's plan is to enter the rooster in a big cockfighting contest 6 months later. And if the cock wins the fight, they'll have all the money they need to live on the rest of their life. The problem is they're completely out of money. And the wife, the Colonel's wife, who's suffering from severe asthma and may die at any time, is trying to get him to sell the cock to the local politician who's wealthy and corrupt. All the people of any wealth in the area are full of corrupt government bureaucrats. She's trying to get him to sell, but he wants to hang on and fight the rooster in the winter when the cockfight is supposed to be held. And so there's this struggle between them, and there's attempts to try to scrounge up enough money to feed themselves until the cockfight occurs. And so the story has the same kind of theme that you see in a lot of Garcia Marquez's novels. The struggle of the poor against an oppressive government and hostile environment, and yet the incredible will to survive. And the Colonel never gives up. He never falls into despair. He says, "We'll figure out something. We'll find some way to continue on." And so it's a really well-written, powerful book, but it's not typical of Garcia Marquez's later work. But you've never read any works by this incredible writer, this is a good place to start. It's very short. It's only about 70 pages. And it's easy to follow. It doesn't have nearly the complexity of 100 Years of Solitude, which has dozens of characters and takes place over a century of time. It's a really epic novel. This is much more small, focused. It's like a long, short story, basically. But it's a good introduction to Garcia Marquez's writing and his vision of the world. So, so I would certainly recommend it if you haven't read anything by Garcia Marquez before, and if you have read 100 Years of Solitude, and you've never read anything else by him, this is a good one to read as well. The book is No One Writes to the Colonel. The author is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This has been another Man and Gray book review. Thanks for watching.